Good afternoon. Glad you're able to join us on Newsfeed today. Well, the ANC has now said that it's facing several critical challenges which are costing it electoral support. It says the high levels of unemployment, inequality, and specifically it points to the violence in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng last year are leading people to lose their confidence in the ANC. It also says there's a lack of accountability and accessibility by ANC deployees, by which I think it means people in government. All of this, it says, are leading to problems for the organisation. All of this comes in policy documents that were released this morning. The documents are supposed to guide discussions by branches ahead of the ANC's policy conference, currently scheduled for July. Professor Dirk Kotze is a professor of politics at UNISA. Professor, good afternoon to you. When the ANC says that the bad economy, the way its own members are behaving, are costing its support, do you think the ANC has properly understood, properly diagnosed the situation it's facing?
Well, I think they are busy with a diagnostic approach, which is quite deep going. For example, in one of their discussion documents about organizational renewal, they describe their own situation as in an existential crisis. Now, you can't really go more further than that in terms of explaining the dire nature in which the ANC finds itself now. So I think there's no denial anymore from within the ANC about the problems that they are experiencing. I think the big issue for them is how to turn it around, how to develop a sense of trust with the public of South Africa again, how for the public to believe that they are genuine with their notion of renewal and of building unity with ANC. So it's more about trust issues, I think, in relation to the public, than, for example, to come up with very new sort of programs of new ideas about how to deal with issues.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, the ANC's policy documents are often the ANC at its most honest, if I can call it that. I mean, you can go back, I think, before even the 2012 conference, but certainly the 2015 National General Council, and the ANC would talk about corruption, would talk pretty much about what it's talking now. So I think the point must be correct. It's easy to diagnose the problem. The problem is that it just can't act, and it can't act because of the politics.
Yes, I think that is the big problem, and part of the diagnosis is the way in which they deal with, or how they identify the lack of values, the fact that the members and senior members of the ANC are not anymore adhering to the traditional values of the ANC, which is about supporting their notion of a national democratic revolution, of how to transform society, but rather that it is self-centered, it's egoistic, it is materialistic to a large extent. And I think their main frustration is how to turn that around, how to go back to a well-integrated organization where it's not about factions and positions, but it is about promoting the ideals of the ANC. So that idealistic element of the ANC, I think, is what they are struggling with now. It has always been in the past, in the first decade of the ANC, the Mandela years and the early years of President Mbeki, that was the very essence of the ANC. But, you know, over time, I would say, especially since 2005, 2007, it went into a much different direction.
It was Kgalema Motlanthe in 2007 who said the rot is across the board. That was his quote, not mine. One of the crucial documents when the ANC releases these documents, and often the area that we see the most contestation, the biggest arguments are around economic transformation. I mean, I think we may remember very clearly around what happened around expropriation of land without compensation in 2017. And there's very little mention of that in these documents. Really just an acknowledgement that the ANC did not have the power in Parliament to move this constitutional change through Parliament. And yet, it was such a big issue at Nasrec.
Yes, that is indeed so. I think one should understand also that these documents are not yet the final products. These are discussion documents on the basis of which they are going to formulate draft resolutions or draft resolutions, I would call it, that will be taken to the national conference in December. But even at the national conference, they won't necessarily approve all of them. And in some instances, because at the national conference they break into commissions and discussion groups, and then go back to the plenary where they submit their final reports. And sometimes in those reports there are resolutions that were not part of these discussion documents. You go, for example, back to the 2017 discussion document on economic policy, and when Enoch Godongwana was still the chairperson of that subcommittee of the NEC, it was also relatively middle of the road, a sort of a centrist type of positions that they adopted. And it was only at the conference in December that these matters about for example, so-called nationalization of the Reserve Bank, of expropriation without compensation, and these matters really were put on the table.
I mean, it's interesting because the I remember Gwede Mantashe, now chair of the ANC, of course, and a minister in cabinet, saying to me once that economics is the essence of politics, and so it's always this commission where the real fights happen. Do you think that is going to happen this time around, or do you think that the ANC's problems now are frankly so much bigger, and I'm talking about corruption, I'm talking about renewal, I'm talking about factionalism, that actually the economy may not be where the argument is this time around?
Yes, partly yes, but I think this Commission on Economic Policy will still attract a lot of the delegates at the national conference at the end. And I think this will be still very much a focus for the ANC. But